In Willow Creek, Ohio, no one locked their doors until a woman was found dead, and the only witness was a barking dog. This isn't just a mystery. It's what happens when darkness slips through an open gate and silence hides the killer. Chapter 1, A Quiet Town Shattered. Willow Creek, Ohio, was a slice of Americana straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Tucked in the heart of the Midwest, its red brick Main Street buzzed the hum of small-town life. The diner where locals swapped gossip over bottomless coffee, the barbershop with its candy-striped pole, and the white steepled church that rang its bells every Sunday, calling folks to prayer. Kids pedaled bikes through quiet streets, their laughter mingling with the chirp of crickets. The annual county fair, with its Ferris wheel glowing against the night sky and prize-winning pumpkins proudly displayed, was a highlight of the year. In Willow Creek, folks left their doors unlocked, not out of carelessness, but because trouble was something that happened in big cities. Not here. The worst crime on record was a teenager swiping a six-pack from their dad's garage fridge. That was the charm of Willow Creek, a place where time seemed to pause, untouched by the chaos of the world beyond its hills. Ellen Harper, 42, was the heartbeat of this community. Her craftsman bungalow on Maple Lane, painted a cheerful yellow with crisp white trim, stood out like a sunflower in a field of green. Roses and lavender spilled over her front yard, their scent drifting on the autumn breeze. Ellen was the kind of woman who made you feel at home with a single smile. She'd show up at the church potluck with her famous apple pies, the crust flaky and golden, earning her the nickname Pie Queen among the kids. At the Willow Creek Library, where she volunteered twice a week, she'd recommend books with a twinkle in her eye, whether it was a mystery for a retiree or a fantasy novel for a shy teenager. Her husband, Tom, a long-haul trucker, was often gone, hauling freight across the Midwest, leaving Ellen to hold down the fort. Their two kids, Emily and Jake, were off at Ohio State, chasing degrees and dreams. Ellen filled her days with gardening, knitting scarves for the winter clothing drive, and sipping tea on her porch swing, waving to neighbors as they passed. But she was careful, always locking her doors, double-checking the gate, a habit Tom had drilled into her after years of hearing grim stories from the road. It was Tuesday, October 15th, a crisp afternoon that smelled of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Sarah Miller, a 38-year-old schoolteacher who lived next door, was walking home from a farmer's market, her wicker basket heavy with apples, a jar of local honey, and a loaf of sourdough from Mrs. Larson's stall. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across Maple Lane, and a cool breeze rustled the trees, their leaves a riot of red and gold. Sarah hummed softly, thinking about the apple crisp she'd baked for her book club. As she passed Ellen's house, something stopped her cold. The wrought iron gate was ajar, its latch dangling loosely, creaking in the wind. Ellen was meticulous about security. Sarah had once teased her, calling her Fort Knox Harper after watching her triple-check the locks before a trip to the grocery store. This was wrong. Ellen, Sarah called, her voice barely carrying over the rustle of leaves. She set her basket down on the sidewalk, her hands suddenly clammy. The front door was cracked open, swaying gently, its hinges groaning like a warning. "Ellen, you there?" She tried again, louder, her heart picking up speed. The silence was suffocating, pressing against her ears like a weight. Sarah stepped through the gate, her sneakers crunching on the gravel path, each step amplifying the knot in her stomach. She climbed the porch steps, her hand hovering over the door. "Ellen, it's Sarah," she called, her voice cracking with unease. No answer. Inside, the living room was a snapshot of Ellen's life. A knitted throw draped neatly over the couch, sunlight filtering through lace curtains, a half-read copy of The Nightingale on the coffee table next to a cold mug of coffee. The air smelled faintly of lavender, Ellen's favorite air freshener, but beneath it was something else, something metallic, sharp. Sarah's skin prickled as she moved toward the hallway, her footsteps muffled on the hardwood. The bedroom door loomed ahead, half open, the darkness beyond it swallowing the light. Her breath hitched as she pushed it open, and then she saw her. Ellen lay sprawled on the floor, her nightgown tangled around her legs, her once vibrant eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A pool of blood spread beneath her, dark and glistening, soaking into the grain of the wood like spilled ink. A kitchen knife, its blade stained red, lay discarded near her hand, and a dented kettle, Ellen's favorite for brewing chamomile tea, sat ominously nearby, its surface marred with scratches. The scene screamed of a struggle, a desperate fight that had ended in tragedy. Sarah's scream tore through the house, a raw, guttural sound that shattered the quiet of Maple Lane. Neighbors spilled out of their homes, drawn by the cry. Old Mr. Jenkins, a Vietnam vet from across the street, hobbled over, his cane tapping frantically against the pavement. Mrs. Larson, still in her gardening gloves, dropped her trowel and sprinted to the gate, her face pale. "What's happened?" she gasped, clutching her husband's arm. "Not Ellen," Mr. Jenkins muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "She's the last person." Within minutes, a crowd gathered, their whispers buzzing like static. The news spread like wildfire, each retelling more incredulous than the last. Ellen Harper, the Pie Queen, the woman who knitted scarves for half the town, was gone. By 1 p.m., Willow Creek Small Police Department arrived, their sirens slicing through the stunned silence. Detective Ryan Carter, 32, led the team, his sharp jawline set with determination. Ryan was a local boy, born and raised in Willow Creek, who traded a football scholarship for a badge after a high school friend overdosed. He had a knack for noticing what others missed, a skill honed over years of solving petty thefts, bar fights, and the occasional missing cow. Beside him was Thunder, a German Shepherd K9 with soulful brown eyes and a nose that could sniff out trouble a mile away. Ryan and Thunder were an inseparable team. Their bond forged through countless training drills and a few high-stakes cases that had earned them a quiet respect countywide. Thunder had once tracked a lost hiker through a snowstorm, and Ryan still kept a newspaper clipping pinned to his office wall. As officers cordoned off the house with yellow tape, Ryan stepped inside, his boots heavy on the porch. Thunder's ears pricked, his tail low as he paced the living room, his nose twitching like he was picking up a scent no one else could. Ryan's eyes swept the scene, cataloging every detail. The untouched furniture, the open door, the faint metallic tang of blood cutting through the lavender air. This wasn't a robbery. Ellen's jewelry box sat untouched on the dresser, her purse still on the kitchen counter with cash spilling out. This was personal, deliberate, and brutal. Ryan's jaw tightened as he looked at Ellen's body, her hands still curled as if she'd fought to her last breath. He crouched beside her, his gloved hand hovering over the knife, careful not to disturb the scene. Thunder let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on the side of the house, toward a window half hidden by a curtain. Outside, the crowd grew, their faces a mix of shock and grief. Mrs. Larson clutched a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Mr. Jenkins shook his head, muttering about how Willow Creek wasn't supposed to be this kind of place. The town's innocence was unraveling, thread by thread, and Ryan felt the weight of it on his shoulders. He'd solved cases before, but nothing like this. This was murder, raw and ugly, in the heart of his hometown. Thunder's growl deepened, his hackles rising as he paced toward the window. Ryan followed, his gut telling him the dog was onto something. Something was out there, waiting to be found, a clue that could crack the case wide open. Willow Creek was about to learn that even in their quiet corner of the world, darkness could hide in plain sight. Chapter 2 Thunder's Warning. The yellow police tape fluttered in the October breeze, a stark contrast to the cheerful yellow of Ellen Harper's bungalow. Willow Creek's quiet streets, usually alive with the chatter of neighbors or the hum of lawnmowers, were now hushed, the air thick with unease. By 2 p.m., the crowd outside Ellen's house had grown, their faces etched with shock and curiosity. News of the murder spread like wildfire, whispered in the diner, texted in group chats, and posted on the town's Facebook page. Ellen Harper gone? One post read, followed by a string of cry emojis. This doesn't happen here. But it had, and Detective Ryan Carter felt the weight of every stare as he stepped out onto the porch, his notepad in hand, and Thunder at his side. Ryan, at 32, was no stranger to pressure. He'd grown up in Willow Creek, the kid who'd thrown the winning touchdown at the county championship, only to turn down a college scholarship after his best friend overdosed on pills stolen from a medicine cabinet. That loss had pushed him toward a badge, a chance to protect his town from the kind of pain he'd felt. But this was different. A murder, brutal and deliberate, in the heart of his hometown. He scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces. Mrs. Larson, still clutching her rosary. Mr. Jenkins, leaning on his cane, muttering about the good old days. Their eyes begged for answers, and Ryan knew he had to deliver. Inside the house, the crime scene was a puzzle waiting to be solved. The living room was pristine, Ellen's knitted throws still folded neatly over the couch, her coffee mug untouched on the counter. The bedroom, though, told a different story. Bloodstains fanned out across the hardwood, a grim map of Ellen's final moments. The kitchen knife and dented kettle lay where they'd fallen, silent witnesses to a struggle. Ryan crouched beside Ellen's body, his gloved hands careful not to disturb the scene. Her fingers were curled, as if she clawed at her attacker. "She fought hard," he murmured, his voice low. Thunder whined softly, nudging Ryan's arm, as if urging him to keep going. The forensic team was already at work, dusting for prints and bagging evidence. Officer Jenny Torres, Ryan's partner and a no-nonsense cop with a knack for spotting patterns, was photographing the room. "No signs of forced entry," she said, her voice clipped. "Front doors intact, locks clean. Whoever did this didn't break in the usual way." Ryan nodded, his mind racing. No robbery either. Ellen's jewelry box sat untouched, a string of pearls glinting in the afternoon light, her purse stuffed with cash. This wasn't about money. It was personal, calculated, and that made it all the more chilling. Thunder, restless, paced the room, his nose low to the ground. Suddenly, he froze, his hackles rising as he let out a deep, guttural growl. His gaze locked on a side window, half hidden by a sheer curtain. The German shepherd's ears twitched, and he began barking furiously, pawing at the floorboards. "What is it, boy?" Ryan asked, crossing the room in 3 strides. The crowd outside fell silent, their eyes following the dog's outburst. Ryan pushed the curtain aside, revealing an aluminum window frame, its latch slightly askew. He leaned closer, his breath catching. There on the frame was a faint smudge, a partial fingerprint, barely visible in the dust. And caught in the latch was a tiny scrap of green wool, no bigger than a thumbnail, swaying faintly in the breeze. "Jenny, get over here," Ryan called, his voice sharp. Torres hurried over, her camera clicking as she zoomed in on the window. "Got something?" she asked. Ryan pointed to the smudge and the wool. "Thunder did," he said, giving the dog a quick pat. Thunder's tail wagged once, but his eyes stayed fixed on the window, as if it could still smell the intruder. Ryan's mind churned. The window was low, easy to climb through, and the latch showed no signs of being forced. Whoever came through here knew what they were doing. This wasn't a random act. It was planned, deliberate, and that made Ryan's blood run cold. He stepped outside to examine the exterior. The window overlooked a narrow alley, shaded by a towering oak tree, its leaves carpeting the ground. Thunder followed, his nose twitching as he sniffed the dirt. Ryan knelt, spotting faint impressions in the mud. Small footprints, too small for a typical man's shoe, maybe a woman's or a slender man's. They led from the alley to the window and back, partially obscured by fallen leaves. "Good boy," Ryan murmured, scratching Thunder's ears. The dog's instincts were razor sharp, and Ryan trusted them more than any gadget in the precinct. Back inside, Ryan briefed the team. "We got a point of entry," he said, pointing to the window. "No forced locks, no broken glass. Whoever did this either had a key or knew how to slip in quietly. The footprints and that will scrap are our first leads." Torres nodded, jotting notes. "Could be a neighbor, someone who knew Ellen's routine," she suggested. Ryan's jaw tightened. The thought of a killer hiding among Willow Creek's familiar faces was unsettling, but it fit. Ellen had no enemies, no debts, no scandals. Whoever did this knew her, watched her, waited. As the forensic team bagged the wool scrap and dusted the window for prints, Ryan's thoughts drifted to a case from 2 years ago. A string of burglaries had hit Willow Creek. Small thefts from unlocked garages. Thunder had tracked the thief to a shed behind the high school, earning a headline in the local paper. K9 hero sniffs out culprit. That case had been simple, a teenager with sticky fingers. This was different, darker, more sinister. Ryan glanced at Thunder, who sat alert by the window, his brown eyes scanning the room. "You're on to something, aren't you?" Ryan said softly. Thunder's ears twitched, as if in agreement. Outside, the crowd had dispersed. The news had spread to the diner, where locals huddled over coffee, piecing together rumors. "I saw Ellen at the market yesterday," one woman whispered. "She was fine, happy even." Another shook his head. "This town's not what it used to be." Ryan caught snippets of their chatter as he stepped onto the porch, Thunder at his heels. Mrs. Larson approached, her eyes red. "Ryan, you'll find who did this, won't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his face grim. "We will, Mrs. Larson. I promise." The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Willow Creek's quiet charm felt like a lie now, its peace shattered by a crime no one saw coming. Ryan's radio crackled with updates on the precinct, but his focus was on the window, the wool scrap, the footprints. Thunder let out another low growl. His nose pointed toward the alley. Ryan got told him the answers were close, hidden in plain sight, just like the killer. He patted Thunder's head, his resolve hardening. "Let's find them, boy," he said. The dog's tail flicked, and together, they turned back to the house, ready to chase the truth, no matter how dark it was. Chapter 3: A Trail of Suspicion. The sun was sinking behind Willow Creek's rolling hills, casting long shadows over Maple Lane as the crime scene team worked into the evening. Ellen Harper's yellow bungalow, once a beacon of warmth, now glowed under the harsh glare of police floodlights. The crowd of neighbors had thinned, but their whispers lingered, carried on the cool October breeze. At the main street diner, locals huddled over coffee, piecing together rumors. Ellen didn't have an enemy in the world, one said, shaking his head. Who could do this? The town's Facebook group buzzed with speculation, some pointing fingers at outsiders, others too stunned to guess. Detective Ryan Carter felt the weight of their questions as he stood in Ellen's backyard, his eyes fixed on the muddy footprints Thunder had sniffed out by the side window. The German shepherd sat alert beside him, his brown eyes scanning the alley, as if the killer's scent still hung in the air. Ryan's notepad was filling up, a partial fingerprint on the window, a scrap of green wool, small footprints in the mud. These clues painted a picture of a calculated crime, not a random act of violence. The lack of forced entry gnawed at him. Whoever did this knew Ellen's house, her habits, maybe even her. Ryan's partner, Officer Jenny Torres, joined in the alley, her flashlight sweeping the ground. "Those prints are small," she said, crouching beside the tracks. "Could be a woman or a guy with a slight build. Definitely not a linebacker." Ryan nodded, his mind racing. And they came through the alley, not the front gate. They didn't want to be seen. Back inside, Thunder was restless, pacing the living room with his nose low, tail stiff. Ryan watched the dog closely. Thunder had a knack for finding what humans missed. 2 years ago, he tracked a stolen car to a barn outside town, earning a chew toy and a front-page story in the Willow Creek Gazette. Now, his focus was on the window, his low growl a warning that the answers were close. Ryan jotted a note to send the footprints for casting and the wool scrap for fiber analysis. But his gut told him the real lead wasn't in the lab. It was out there in Willow Creek, hiding among familiar faces. The next morning, Ryan and Jenny sat at the precinct, a squat brick building next to the town's only stoplight. Over stale coffee, They reviewed witness statements. Sarah Miller, the neighbor who'd found Ellen, was still shaken, her voice trembling as she recounted the open gate and eerie silence. Other neighbors mentioned Ellen's routine. Morning coffee on the porch, gardening in the afternoon, library shifts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was a creature of habit, Mrs. Larson had said, her rosary beads clicking nervously. Always waved me when I was weeding. No one reported seeing strangers lurking, but few mentioned a name that pricked Ryan's ears. Frank Thompson. Frank, 66, was a loner who lived in a rundown trailer 3 blocks from Ellen's house, tucked behind an overgrown hedge on Oak Street. He'd worked as a night watchman at Harper's Lumber, the warehouse owned by Ellen's husband, Tom, until he quit a year ago. Ryan remembered Frank from his high school days, a quiet man who'd manned the gate at the lumber yard, his eyes always scanning, rarely smiling. Neighbors described him as odd, someone who kept to himself, his trailer's curtains always drawn. Mrs. Larson, hesitant, mentioned seeing Frank linger near Ellen's house once, watching her garden from across the street. "It gave me the creeps," she admitted, her voice low. He just stood there, staring. Ryan's pulse quickened. He and Jenny drove to Oak Street, Thunder riding in the back of the cruiser, his nose pressed to the window. Frank's trailer was a faded green box, its paint peeling, the yard a tangle of weeds and rusted lawn chairs. A battered bicycle leaned against the porch, its tires caked with mud. Ryan knocked, his hand resting on his holster. Frank opened the door, his gaunt frame filling the doorway. His gray hair was thinning, his eyes sunken, and his flannel shirt hung loosely on his slight build. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice raspy, like he hadn't spoken in days. "We're investigating Ellen Harper's death," Ryan said, keeping his tone neutral. "Mind if we ask you a few questions?" Frank's eyes flickered, but he nodded, stepping aside. The trailer's interior was dim, smelling of stale cigarettes and mildew. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows on stacks of old newspapers and a sagging couch. Thunder, on a leash, sniffed the air, his ears twitching. Ryan noted Frank's small feet, maybe a size 8, close to the footprints in the alley. "You knew Ellen?" Ryan asked, watching Frank's face. "Barely," Frank said, his gaze darting to the floor. "She was the boss's wife. Saw her at the lumber yard a few times. That's all." His voice was flat, but his hands fidgeted, twisting a frayed rag. Jenny chimed in, her tone casual. "Where were you Tuesday night, Frank?" "Around midnight." Frank's jaw tightened. "At the warehouse, working the night shift. Got off at 3 a.m. Ryan made a mental note to check the warehouse's security footage. Something about Frank's demeanor, the way he avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in his hands, set Ryan's instincts on edge. Thunder, still sniffing, let out a sharp bark, his nose pointed at a corner of the room. Ryan followed the dog's gaze to a pair of worn work boots tucked under the couch, their soles crusted with mud. A dark stain, almost black, marred the toe of one boot. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "Mind if we take a look around?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. Frank hesitated, then shrugged, but his eyes betrayed a flash of panic. "Go ahead," he muttered, stepping back. Ryan knelt beside the boots, Thunder's nose inches from the stain. It looked like dry blood, though he couldn't be sure until the lab tested it. "Bag these," he told Jenny, who nodded, pulling an evidence bag from her kit. Thunder's tail flicked, his focus unwavering. Ryan stood, his eyes locking with Frank's. "We'll need you to come to the station later, Frank," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Frank nodded, his face pale, but said nothing. As they left the trailer, the setting sun bathed Willow Creek in a golden glow. But the town felt colder now, its charm tainted. Back at the precinct, Ryan sat at his desk, the boots and wool scrap on their way to the lab. He pulled up Frank's file, a minor theft charge from a decade ago, a messy divorce, and a reputation for being off. Nothing concrete, but enough to make Ryan's skin crawl. He thought of Ellen, her smile, her pies, her quiet kindness. If Frank was involved, Ryan would find out. Thunder, curled up by his desk, let out a soft whine, as if sensing the storm brewing. The answers were out there, closer than Ryan realized, and the next clue would turn this case upside down. Chapter for the Net Titans. The morning after visiting Frank Thompson's trailer, Willow Creek woke to a gray sky, the kind that promised rain and seemed to mirror the town's heavy mood. The Main Street diner, usually packed with farmers and retirees swapping stories over pancakes, was quieter now. The clink of coffee cups drowned out by hushed conversations about Ellen Harper's murder. The town's Facebook group had exploded overnight, with posts ranging from grief-stricken tributes to wild theories about drifters or revenge plots. Ellen deserved better, one user wrote, alongside a photo of her smiling at last year's county fair, a blue ribbon pinned to her apron for her apple pie. Detective Ryan Carter, nursing a black coffee at his desk in the precinct, scrolled through the posts on his phone, his jaw tight. The town was looking to him for answers, and he was determined to deliver. The precinct, a squat brick building next to Willow Creek's only stoplight, buzzed with activity. Officer Jenny Torres, Ryan's partner, was pinning photos to a corkboard. Ellen's crime scene, the muddy footprints, the green wool scrap, and Frank's work boots, their dark stain glaring under the fluorescent lights. Ryan's eyes lingered on the boots, his mind replaying Thunder's reaction the day before, the way the German Shepherd's hackles had risen, his nose locked on that stain. Lab results should be in soon, Jenny said, breaking the silence. If that's Ellen's blood, we've got him. Ryan nodded, but his gut churned. Frank's nervous fidgeting, his vague answers. Something wasn't right. He'd seen liars before, and Frank's eyes had the look of a man hiding more than he let on. The first break came at 10 a.m. A forensic tech rushed into the precinct, a printout in hand. The blood on the boots, she said, breathless. It's a match for Ellen Harper. Ryan's pulse quickened, his coffee forgotten. The tech continued. The partial fingerprint on the window? It's Frank Thompson's. No question. Jenny let out a low whistle, but Ryan stayed silent, his mind racing. A fingerprint, blood, and those small footprints in the alley. It was a trail leading straight to Frank. But why? Ellen was kind to everyone, even loners like Frank. What could drive a man to such a brutal act? Ryan pulled up the security footage from Harper's Lumber, where Frank worked the night shift. The grainy video showed Frank at his post at 11:45 p.m., checking trucks at the gate. But between 1 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., the coroner's estimated time of Ellen's death, Frank was gone. No sign of him at the warehouse. No log of him checking the perimeter. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he rewound the tape, catching a fleeting glimpse of a figure on a bicycle near a gas station block from Ellen's house at 1:15 a.m. The build matched Frank's, slight, hunched, pedaling fast. Got you, Ryan muttered, his heart pounding. He and Jenny drove back to Oak Street, Thunder in the back of the cruiser. His ears pricked as if he sensed the hunt was closing in. Frank was waiting at his trailer, his face paler than yesterday, his hands stuffed in his pockets. We need you at the station, Ryan said, his voice firm. Frank nodded, his eyes darting to the ground, but he followed without protest. At the precinct, they led him to a small interrogation room, its walls bare except for a one-way mirror. Thunder sat outside, his gaze fixed on the door, as if guarding the truth itself. Ryan sat across from Frank, the table between them scarred with years of confessions and denials. Jenny stood by the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Frank, Ryan began, sliding a photo of the boots across the table. We found blood on these. Ellen's blood. Care to explain? Frank's face twitched, his fingers twisting the frayed rag he brought with him. I don't know, he stammered. Must have stepped in something. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low but hard. And your fingerprint on her window? You were there, Frank, the night she died. Frank's eyes widened, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. I wasn't in her house, he said, his voice rising. "I found a key on the road a while back, maybe hers, but I never used it." Ryan's blood ran cold. A key? Ellen had reported a spare gate key missing 2 years ago during a repair job at her house. One Frank had helped with, working for a Tom's Lumber crew. Ryan slid another photo across the table. The gas station footage, the blurry figure on a bike. "This you, Frank?" 1:15 a.m., a block from Ellen's house. Frank's hand shook, the rag slipping to the floor. "I was just riding around," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't do anything." But his eyes told a different story. Panic, guilt, a man cornered. Jenny stepped forward, her tone cutting. "You left your post at the warehouse, Frank. No one saw you for 2 hours. Where were you?" Frank's mouth opened, then closed, his shoulders slumping. He was breaking, but not yet broken. Ryan leaned back, his mind racing. The evidence was damning. Blood, a fingerprint, a missing key, a missing alibi. But something was missing. A motive. Why Ellen? Why now? He thought of her smile at the county fair, handing out slices of pie, her kindness a light in Willow Creek. Frank, with his lonely trailer and shifty eyes, didn't fit the picture of a cold-blooded killer. Or did he? Ryan's radio crackled with a new report. A key, found in Frank's trailer during a second search, matched Ellen's gate. It was the final piece, locking Frank to the crime. Outside, Willow Creek was restless. The diner was packed now, locals glued to their phones. The Facebook group flooded with updates. "They've got someone in custody." One post read, shared 50 times in an hour. Sarah Miller, still reeling, sat at the library where Ellen used to volunteer, staring at the empty chair behind the counter. Mrs. Larson organized a candlelight vigil, the church already booking up for a memorial. The town was holding its breath, waiting for justice. Ryan stood, his chair scraping the floor. "We're not done, Frank," he said, his voice like steel. "You're staying here until we get the truth." Frank's head dropped, his hands covering his face. Thunder outside the room let out a low growl, as if sensing confession that was coming. Ryan stepped into the hall, his heart heavy but resolute. The net was tightening, but the why of it all, the darkness that drove a neighbor to murder, still lurked in the shadows, waiting to be exposed. Chapter 5, The Confession. Rain pattered against the precinct's windows, a steady drumbeat that matched the tension in the air. Inside the small interrogation room, the fluorescent light buzzed, casting harsh shadows across Frank Thompson's gaunt face. Detective Ryan Carter sat across from him, his notepad open, the evidence photos spread out like a grim collage. The bloody boots, the window's fingerprint, the blurry gas station footage, the gate key. Frank's hands trembled, the frayed rag he clutched now a crumpled heap on the table. Officer Jenny Torres leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes boring into Frank like she could see through his lies. Outside, Thunder, the German Shepherd K9, lay by the door, his ears pricked, as if guarding the truth that was about to spill. It was 3 p.m. on Wednesday, October 16th, and Willow Creek held its breath, waiting for answers. Ryan's voice was low, controlled, but carried an edge like a blade. "Frank, we got your fingerprint on Ellen's window, her blood on your boots, a key to her gate in your trailer, and you on camera near her house at 1:15 a.m. You were there. You killed her. Stop lying." Frank's had jerked up, his eyes wild, but he said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin line. Ryan leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "Ellen fought hard, didn't she? She didn't deserve this. Tell us why." The room was silent except for the rain and the faint hum of the light. Frank's shoulders slumped, his hands covered his face, and for a moment, Ryan thought he'd stay silent. Then, a choked sob broke the stillness. "I didn't mean to," Frank whispered, his voice barely audible, cracking like dry leaves. I just wanted to talk to her." Ryan's stomach churned, but he kept his face neutral, letting Frank unravel. Jenny shot him a glance, her eyebrow raised, but she stayed quiet, letting the moment build. Frank's hands dropped, revealing eyes red with tears or guilt. Ryan couldn't tell which. 2 years ago, Frank continued, his voice shaking, I worked on her house, fixing the gate for Tom. I saw her every day, smiling, bringing us coffee. She was kind, too kind. He paused, swallowing hard. I took the key, kept it, watched her sometimes from the street. I didn't mean no harm. Ryan's blood ran cold. Watched her? The image of Ellen, tending her roses, unaware of eyes lurking in the shadows, made his fists clench under the table. Go on, he said, his voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside. Frank's head bowed, his words spilling faster now, like a dam breaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I rode my bike to her street just to see her house. The gate was easy, I had the key. The window was unlocked. I just wanted to talk, to tell her how I felt. But she woke up, screamed, grabbed the kettle. I panicked. I hit her with it, and then the knife was there on the counter. I didn't mean to. His voice broke, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean to kill her. The room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of Frank's confession. Jenny's face was stone, but her eyes burned with disgust. Ryan leaned back, his heart heavy. Ellen, with her apple pies and library shifts, had been betrayed by a neighbor's twisted obsession, a man she trusted enough to bring coffee to. He thought of the county fair last summer. Ellen laughing as she handed him a slice of pie, her kids cheering at the dunk tank. That memory, so vivid, clashed with the image of her lifeless body on the hardwood floor. You planned this, Frank, Ryan said, his voice low. You took that key years ago. You watched her. This wasn't an accident. Frank's sobs grew louder, but he didn't deny it. Jenny stepped forward, her voice sharp. You left her there, bleeding, and went back to your trailer like nothing happened. You think that's okay? Frank shook his head, his hands trembling. I'm sorry, he whispered, but the words fell hollow, a weak echo in the face of Ellen's loss. Ryan stood, his chair scraping the floor. You're under arrest for the murder of Ellen Harper, he said, his voice steady but laced with anger. We're done here. He signaled to an officer outside, who entered to cuff Frank. As they led him away, Frank's head hung low, his confession hanging in the air like smoke. Outside, Willow Creek was reeling. The news of Frank's arrest spread faster than the rain, lighting up the town's Facebook group. Frank Thompson? That creep from Oak Street? One post read, followed by a flood of angry emojis. At the main street diner, locals packed the booths, their voices a mix of relief and horror. Sarah Miller, still haunted by the image of Ellen's body, sat at the library, staring at the empty volunteer desk, a tissue crumpled in her hand. Mrs. Larson, organizing the candlelight vigil, added Frank's name to her prayers. Though her voice trembled with anger, the town was knitting itself back together. But the scars would linger. Ryan stepped into the precinct's break room, pouring another coffee, his hands shaking slightly. Thunder nudged his leg, whining softly, as if sensing his turmoil. Ryan crouched, scratching the dog's ears. You got us here, boy, he said, his voice thick. He thought of Ellen's kids, Emily and Jake, who'd get the call from Tom tonight, their world shattered. He thought of the vigil, the church pews filled with grieving neighbors. The case was breaking open, but the why of it all, Frank's sick obsession, left a bitter taste. Ryan's radio crackled with a new report. A neighbor had seen Frank near Ellen's house weeks ago, holding something small, maybe a letter. Was there more to his motive? Something he hadn't confessed? Ryan stood, his resolve hardening. The truth wasn't finished with them yet. Chapter 6 Justice for Willow Creek. The Willow Creek Courthouse, a modest brick building with a flag flapping in the November wind, was packed to the rafters. It was a chilly Monday morning, 6 weeks after Ellen Harper's murder, and the town had come to see justice served. Locals squeezed into the wooden pews, their faces a mix of grief and resolve. Mrs. Larson with her rosary, Sarah Miller clutching a tissue, old Mr. Jenkins leaning on his cane. The Main Street diner sat empty, its usual crowd drawn to the trial instead, and the town's Facebook group had gone quiet, as if holding its breath. Detective Ryan Carter sat in the back row, his hands clasped tightly, Thunder lying at his feet, the German shepherd's brown eyes scanning the room. The weight of the case, from that first scream on Maple Lane to Frank Thompson's confession, pressed on Ryan's shoulders, but today he hoped the town could begin to heal. Frank stood before the judge, his gaunt frame swallowed by an ill-fitting suit, his eyes fixed on the floor. The prosecution, led by a sharp young attorney named Claire Evans, laid out the case with precision. The blood on Frank's boots, his fingerprint on the window, the gate key stolen 2 years earlier, the gas station footage placing him near Ellen's house. Claire's voice rose as she described Frank's obsession, his late-night watches, his calculated entry through the window. This was no accident, she said, her words cutting through the courtroom. Frank Thompson betrayed a woman who trusted him, a neighbor who brought him coffee, and he took her life in a moment of twisted desperation. The jury, a mix of farmers, teachers, and retirees, listened intently, their faces grim. Ellen's family sat in the front row, their pain palpable. Tom Harper, back from his trucking route, gripped the armrest, his knuckles white, his eyes red from sleepless nights. Emily and Jake, home from college, clung to each other, their faces pale. Ryan had met them the day after Frank's arrest, delivering the news of the confession in a quiet precinct room. Emily had sobbed, asking why anyone would hurt her mom. Jake had stared at the floor, silent but shaking. Now, as Claire played Frank's recorded confession, his trembling voice admitting to the kettle, the knife, the panic, the family wept, their grief echoing in the hushed courtroom. Frank's defense attorney, a tired public defender, argued for leniency, citing Frank's lack of prior violent crimes and his momentary lapse. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury's deliberation lasted less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman, a local mechanic, stood tall. We find the defendant, Frank Thompson, guilty of first-degree murder, attempted assault, and breaking and entering. The courtroom exhaled, a collective release of tension. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, sentenced Frank to life without parole, her gavel striking like a final nail. Frank didn't look up as he was led away, his handcuffs clinking, his shadow disappearing down the hall. Outside, Willow Creek was changing. The murder had peeled back the town's innocence, exposing a vulnerability no one wanted to admit. Porch lights stayed on longer now, and security cameras sprouted on houses like mushrooms after rain. The town council held meetings on safety, with flyers advertising self-defense classes and neighborhood watch programs. The Facebook group, once filled with fair photos and lost pet posts, now debated motion sensor lights and deadbolts. Yet, amidst the fear, the community grew tighter. Neighbors checked on each other, sharing casseroles and phone numbers. Sarah Miller started a book club at the library in Ellen's honor, reading The Nightingale, Ellen's favorite. Mrs. Larson's candlelight vigil had drawn hundreds, their flames flickering against the night sky. That evening, the First Baptist Church hosted a memorial for Ellen, its pews overflowing with mourners. A photo of Ellen, smiling with a pie at the county fair, sat on the altar, surrounded by roses from her garden. Tom spoke briefly, his voice breaking as he thanked the town for their support. Ellen loved this place, he said, and she'd want us to keep loving it together. Emily and Jake read a poem, their voices trembling but strong, and the choir sang Amazing Grace, the notes carrying out into the chilly air. Ryan stood at the back, Thunder by his side, his throat tight. He thought of the case file on his desk, now closed, and the weight it carried, the sleepless nights, the pressure to deliver, the image of Ellen's blood on the floor. As the service ended, Ryan stepped outside, the stars bright above Willow Creek's quiet streets. Thunder nudged his hand, whining softly, and Ryan crouched, scratching the dog's ears. "We did it, boy," he said, his voice thick. Thunder's tail wagged, his eyes warm, a silent partner in the pursuit of justice. Ryan's mind drifted to a moment at last year's fair, when Ellen had handed him a slice of pie, laughing about how Thunder had tried to sneak a bite. That memory, so simple, felt like a lifeline now, a reminder of why he'd chosen this path. The case had become a model for police training, with Thunder's role, his barking at the window, his nose on those boots, highlighted in K-9 seminars. Ryan had been offered promotion to a bigger city, but he'd turned it down. Willow Creek was home, flaws and all, and he'd fight to keep it safe. As he walked his cruiser, Thunder at his heels, he saw Mrs. Larson lighting a candle on her porch, a small act of defiance against the dark. The town was healing, slowly, but the scars would always remain. And somewhere in the quiet of Maple Lane, Ellen's roses still bloomed, a testament to a life taken too soon in a community that refused a break. The town will never be the same, but one dog made sure justice had a voice. If this story kept you on edge, hit like, subscribe, and drop a paw prints in the comment for Thunder, the real hero of Willow Creek. More true crime stories coming every week, because the truth always leaves a trace.